The next great author was John Milton. Milton wrote Paradise Lost. Then his wife died and he wrote Paradise Regained. Christopher Columbus, whose mother was Columbine, was a great navigator who discovered America while cursing about the Atlantic. His ships were called the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Fe. In 1658, the Pilgrims crossed the ocean, and this was known as Pilgrim's Progress. When they landed at Plymouth Rock, they were greeted by the Indians, who came down the hill rolling their war whoops before them. The Indian squaws carried porpoises on their backs. Many of the Indian heroes were killed along with their cabooses, which proved very fatal to them. The winter of 1620 was a hard one for the settlers. Many people died and many babies were born. Captain John Smith was responsible for all this. One of the causes of the Revolutionary War was the English put tax in their tea. Also, the colonists would send their parcels through the post without stamps. During the war, the Redcoats and Paul Revere was throwing balls over stone walls. The dogs were barking and the peacocks crowing. The colonists won the war and no longer had to pay for taxis. Delegates from the original 13 states formed the Contented Congress. Thomas Jefferson, a virgin, and Benjamin Franklin were two singers of the Declaration of Independence. Benjamin Franklin had gone to Boston carrying all his clothes in his pocket and a loaf of bread under each arm. He produced electricity by rubbing cats backward and declared, oh, this is so appropriate, declared, a horse divided against itself cannot stand. Franklin died in 1790 and is still dead. The Constitution of the United States was adopted to secure domestic hostility. Under the Constitution, the people enjoyed the right to keep bear arms. George Washington married Martha Curtis, and in due time became the father of our country. Later, Abraham Lincoln became America's greatest president. Lincoln's mother died in infancy, and he was born in a log cabin which he built with his own hands. When Lincoln was president, he wore only a tall silk hat. He said, "In onion there is strength." Abraham Lincoln wrote the Gettysburg Address while traveling from Washington to Gettysburg on the back of an envelope. He also freed the slaves by signing the Emasculation Proclamation, and the 14th Amendment gave the ex-Negroes citizenship. But the Ku Klux Klan would torture, torment, and lynch the ex-Negroes and other innocent victims. It claimed it represented law and order. On the night of April 14th, 1865, Lincoln went to the theater and got shot in his seat by one of the actors in a moving picture show. The believed assassinator was John Wilkes Booth, a supposedly insane actor. This ruined Booth's career. Meanwhile, in Europe, the Enlightenment was a reasonable time. Voltaire invented electricity and also wrote a book called Candy. Gravity was invented by Isaac Walton. It is chiefly noticeable in the autumn when the apples are falling off the trees. Bach was the most famous composer in the world, and so was Handel. Bach died from 1750 to the present. Handel was half German, half Italian, and half English. He was rather large. France was in a very serious state. The French Revolution was accomplished before it happened. The Marseillaise was the theme song of the French Revolution, and it catapulted into Napoleon. During the Napoleonic Wars, the crowned heads of Europe were trembling in their shoes. Then the Spanish guerrillas came down from the hills and nipped at Napoleon's flanks. Napoleon became very ill with bladder problems and was very tense and unrestrained. He wanted an heir to inherit his powers, but since Josephine was a baroness, she couldn't bear children. The sun never sets on the British Empire, because the British Empire is in the east, and the sun sets in the west. Queen Victoria was the longest queen on the throne. She sat on a throne for 63 years. Her reclining years and finally the end of her life were exemplary of her great personality. Her death was the final event which ended her reign. The 19th century was a time of many great inventions and thoughts. The invention of the steamboat caused a network of rivers to spring up. Cyrus McCormick invented the McCormick Raper, which did the work of 100 men. Samuel Morse invented a code of telepathy. Pasteur discovered a cure for rabbis. Charles Darwin was a naturalist who wrote The Organ of the Species. Madman Curie discovered radium. And Karl Marx became one of the Marx Brothers. The First World War, caused by the assignation of the Archduck by a serf, ushered in new eras in the annals of human history. There will be a test next period.